I'm Tanya White, and I want to speak today about Parshat Vayigash. Parshat Vayigash is a parasha in which we see the development of Yosef, specifically of Yosef and Yehuda. And if we think about the entire story of Yosef, it's compelling at every level. And that's why it made such a good musical. And it's also why it's one of the most well-known stories in the Bible. He goes from riches to rags to riches. There's fratricide, there's killing, there's revenge, there's reunion. But underneath its ostensible Hollywood appeal, it actually tells a very profound truth about human lives. It tells us a truth about what we are, who we are, how we connect to others. If we look at Yosef, he begins as a Na'ar. Rashi speaks about the idea that he was vain and he looked at himself in the mirror. What's Rashi really saying? He's really talking about the idea that Yosef connected only with his external self, only with his, as Donald Winnicott will call it, his full self, meaning he wasn't connected to the inner part of his being. He had very little emotional intelligence. He tells his dream to his brothers. The brothers respond, they're angry. Yosef continues to tell the dreams, but doesn't even seem that he's doing it from a point of being spiteful. He's doing it because he's simply emotionally disconnected to what his words do. As he moves along, and last week we spoke about the fact that he meets this Ish in the field, in the Sadeh, and this Ish actually Ebe Sadeh, he's wandering in the field, much like Yaakov meets the Ish on the edge of the river, and Yaakov, the Ish that he meets, is a part of himself to a degree. So too Yosef begins to wonder. There's this moment in which he looks and he actually says, "Where are my brothers?" Suddenly, he sees outside of himself. He connects with something internal that allows him to build a sense of emotional intelligence, to recognize that self-consciousness is born through self-awareness, through awareness of the self that allows one to be aware of the other. He's thrown in a pit. He faces adversity. The greatest fragmentation, the ripping of his coat, which is a ripping in many ways of the illusion of himself, of who he is, of what it represents, of the externalities that he had connected to, or the immature kind of childlike existence that he had led, which was ripped from within him. From that moment forth, in the bottom of the pit, Yosef grows, he develops, he goes through a radical transformation. And at every stage, he has to ask himself the difficult questions about himself, about his values, about his identity, his priorities. And at every stage, he could choose differently. He could become someone who stands by his principles, but also someone who doesn't, someone who looks outside himself, but also someone who's selfish and only wants to survive. Yosef recognizes that there are always two choices of narrative in our lives. One that only sees ourselves as what is the given, what is our DNA, what is in the here and now. One that understands that there's something that transcends the self. He is someone who moves Yosef from zero awareness of the feelings around him to someone that has deep empathy and a high emotional intelligence. He reads every situation where the other is involved in a careful way. He gets to the prison after standing up for his principles and who he is in front of the wife of Potiphar. He gets to the bottom of the bottom. He is serving other prisoners, the baker and the butler of Paro. What allows for the moment of change, for the change in the narrative, the change in the story, is when he sees that they are sad. He notices people that he is serving. When he is at the bottom of the pit, bottom of the bottom in prison, he notices that they come in disturbed after a night's sleep. And he asks them, what is wrong? Then they respond and they read their dreams. They tell him his dreams and he reads them. He is a reader of dreams, not necessarily because God gives him prophecy, which we do not see in the text, but rather because he's profoundly and acutely aware of the other and listens carefully to what they say. And what he realizes that the baker who is passive in his dream the bread gets eaten from his basket, it's on top of him. He has death set upon him. And the butler, who is the active agent of change in his, who comes, who does everything, he's part of the process, he is saved. What Yosef learns, he really kind of, he is able to see the inflections of the divine, even in the dreams that he interprets, and he understands that the person who takes agency, the person who's part of the process, the person who is autonomous, that's the person who is saved. And he says to the baker, you go and you tell Paro, do not forget me. With Paro's dreams, the same thing. He watches and he listens. He is able to distinguish between the first and the second dream. He sees what's there, he sees what isn't, and that's what allows him to interpret. And he says to Paro, in the Egyptian world, the fatalistic world, there's nothing you can do to change what's going to be. But in the Jewish world, in the world that the principle, the world, the value system that I align with, their Jewish model is that you can change fate into destiny, passiveness into activeness. You can determine the outcome of your future. And Paro listens to this new paradigm of existence, and he takes Yosef and he ensures that Yosef stands at the top of the pyramid, the top of the of the hierarchy in Egypt, in order to show them what this new paradigm looks like. At every stage in Yosef's life, he has a choice to bring God into the picture or to leave him out, to let him be the lead figure in his story, or to promote himself and his ego and his vanity. And at every stage, Yosef promotes God to the primary actor in his story. In this week's parasha, we see two of the primary actors, Yehuda and Yosef, are able to reframe the narrative in a way that lends them and everyone else around them agency and fortitude. Yosef, the loved one, the favored one, the Na'al, only seeing himself in the mirror. And then he isn't. He's in a pit. He's a slave. He's a victim. He's a passive prisoner. He's an exploited servant. Yehuda, the less loved, the less favors. He realizes that his father loves the sons of Rachel more than the sons of Leah. He sees only himself, his legacy, his sons. He doesn't care about his daughter-in-law Tamar. He doesn't care about her fate. Until the moment in which he too goes through an awakening. And he too realizes that he has to break out of his own narcissistic reality to see that there is someone else, to see that there is another. To truly see ourselves, we have to see others. We have to understand others. We have to intuit others' feelings and empathize. These two characters, Yehuda and Yosef, more than anyone else in the entire story of Bereshit, are people who move us from fate to destiny. They have an ability to reframe their life narratives, to tell a story that gives space to family, to agency, to freedom, to destiny. In the ancient world, the story of rags to riches was unheard of. It wasn't Hollywood. But Yosef manages it. How does he do it? He reframes his story. In the ancient world, everyone had a place. You were either, in a very literal way, at the bottom of the pyramid or the top of the pyramid. Yosef moves from the bottom to the top. How? Because he is cognizant of the other. He notices the other. He sees the mood of the baker and the butler. He listens acutely to their dreams. He is the first dream interpreter, but he doesn't just interpret dreams. He interprets his own reality. He sees it as other than it is. He imagines it differently. He understands that our given conditions don't determine our future. And he teaches it to the entire Jewish nation. In one of the most moving speeches, Yehuda does the same thing. He reframes the entire story of the family. And he doesn't see himself anymore as the brother who is the victim. He understands his father. He understands what his father is and why his father did what he did. He understands that all of us are made up of a complex web of desires and loves and hates and traumas and history. And sometimes we need to show ourselves a perspective that we have not been able to see until that moment. Yosef responds in kind to Yehuda's narrative by paralleling his cathartic framing. When he reveals himself to the brothers, he reframes the story and shifts the family of the reality. He says then, don't be upset because you sold me. Why? Because it was God's doing. It was God and not you. There's no blaming and shaming. There's no guilt. There's no reproach. It's a zoom out. He zooms out, and that enables forgiveness and reconciliation. Yehuda becomes the tribe of kingship, because to rule over others, first you have to take control of your own destiny. Yosef is able to unify the brothers because he is able to show them that we can all reframe our narrative. We need to do it through actively listening to the other, through showing empathy, through being acutely aware of where I am and where you are and where we all are in a bigger narrative of humankind. May we be blessed to write a new page in the book of our people, us too reframing the narrative, a book, a page that has the pain and has the soaked in the pain and blood of the last few months, but also a page that shows the unbridled commitment all of our people have to our nation. We are able to write a new story, a new page for our nation, but we have to do it from the perspective of seeing the other and knowing that we all have a role to play in unifying the people of Israel, just like our forefather Yosef.